James Barratt's presentation on the intelligence explosion. James has written a number of books, one of which is very relevant to discussion today, and that's Our Final Invention. I had the pleasure of interviewing James Barratt twice on that book. One back in the day when, like, just after he wrote it, and then more of a like a let's see how things are tracking kind of interview a few years ago. I think it was in 2020.
Hmm.
So yes, it's real pleasure to have you back, James. Now, it's not just AI that you write about. You've written about a whole slew of subjects, but the focus today is on your up and coming books. I think you got two. One of them is focusing on the intelligence explosion, and
Yeah,
the AI arms race is the topic of the other book. I
yeah,
hope I've got that right. But
you
thanks
do.
so much for joining us, James. Welcome to Future Day.
Well, thanks for having me, Adam. It's great to be here, and I'll just launch into it.
Yeah.
As you said, I've got a book that is coming out this summer called The Intelligence Explosion. It's kind of a follow-on, kind of a sequel to my 2013 book, Our Final Invention. Um, but let me just go into it. The Intelligence Explosion is a thought experiment. It's a hypothetical scenario that describes a rapid and exponential increase in the intelligence of AI systems, leading to the emergence of artificial general intelligence and potentially artificial superintelligence. Now, I'm not going to describe the whole book to you because if I did, why would you buy it? And we'd all be. I started creating a presentation chapter by chapter, and it would be too long. What I like to do is pull some personalities and moments out of the book which are demonstrative of the issues facing us in AI right now. Let me set the stage for the first one. It's Bletchley Park in England during World War II. Bletchley Park was the central location for British
Mhm.
codebreakers for their efforts to decrypt and analyze German communications. I.J. Good, a mathematician, was recruited to Bletchley Park by the best chess player in the UK. At the time, I.J. Good was the second best chess player. He became good friends there with Alan Turing, who was the chief at Bletchley Park. We know Alan Turing as the father of modern computing. One thing I want to note is just through the press and biographies and stuff, everybody prominent gets to be the father or the godfather or something. I'm going to
Mhm.
point that out as we go along. We know Alan Turing is the father of modern computing. Babbage is the father of computing. Turing taught I.J. Good the Asian game Go. This is back in the uh, in the 40s. Good helped Turing with his chess game. Soon Good could beat Turing at Go as well. So Good was beating him at both. But Turing devised a version of chess that was very interesting. So you'd make a move, then you'd run all the way around his house and garden, and by the time you got back, your opponent had to make his move. And then he'd take off running around the house and garden. Now, this was a big advantage to Turing because he was a world class runner. He was almost in the 1933 Olympics, but he injured his ankle. Anyway, the codebreakers were going after the Enigma machine. Every day, German command radioed encoded orders from their Enigma machine in Berlin to hundreds of Enigma machines deployed around the world in ships, submarines, with troops. And they were sent just by radio signal, and they were passed from tower to tower. And the English could capture the signal, but they couldn't. But it was encoded, and they couldn't break the code. Every night, German command would change the code on a series of wheels on the Enigma. The Enigma was just a machine about the size of a typewriter. So the Enigma was a code sender and a code translator. If you're anywhere near the Field Museum in Chicago, they've got a World War II German sub that was captured solely so that they could capture the Enigma machine that they knew was on it. Alan Turing and his team at Bletchley Park did not focus solely on trying to break the intricate encryption of the codes. Instead, they approached the Turing had an insight. He decided to look for patterns, inconsistencies, and weaknesses in the messages themselves that they received. Um, by observing what the messages were not, Turing and his colleagues were able to deduce critical information that helped in determining what the messages were. So after years of work, they finally broke the code, giving the Allies the huge advantage of knowing German movements and plans every day for the last 4 years of the war, which is really an incredible advantage. After the war, as many of you know, Turing was convicted of being homosexual, which was illegal at the time, and he lost his security clearance. He was unemployable, and he couldn't work for any classified projects. He couldn't even teach in a university. He killed himself. Good later wrote that he doesn't know if the Allies would have lost the war without Turing, but he believed that Turing shortened the war by 5 or more years. Good didn't join the British Secret Service as he was invited to do. Instead, he left England, never to return again, and he went to the United States. There, he was hired by Virginia Tech, the Virginia Technological University in Blacksburg, Virginia. They just call it Virginia Tech around here. He was there to be a celebrity statistician. All he had to do was write. He didn't have to teach any classes. Yet he was paid more than Virginia Tech's president. In 1965, IBM asked Good to evaluate a computer for them. After Good examined the computer, he came up with the idea of an intelligence explosion after he saw this computer. Here's how he described it in a 1965 paper. The survival of man depends on the early construction of an ultra-intelligent machine. In order to design an ultra-intelligent machine, we need to understand more about the human brain or human thought or both. Let an ultra-intelligent machine be defined as a machine that can far surpass all the intellectual activities of any man, however clever. Since the design of machines is one of those intellectual activities, an ultra-intelligent machine could design even better machines. There would then unquestionably be an intelligence explosion, and the intelligence of man would be left behind. Thus, the first ultra-intelligent machine is the last invention that man ever need make, provided that the machine is docile enough to tell us how to keep it under control. It's interesting, we're battling with the control problem now. He was anticipating it in 1965. The intelligence explosion raises profound implications. Excuse me, my throat's cracking. For society, for economics, for existential risks. It suggests a future where AI systems could outperform humans in nearly every intellectual task, potentially transforming industries, governance, and the fabric of society. It might merely replace jobs, or the superintelligence might decide we mouth breathers are taking up too much real estate. As Eliezer Yudkowsky says, it might decide it has better use for the atoms that make up our bodies than we do. I.J. Good wrote that our survival depends on making a superintelligent machine to help us with our problems. In 1965, there were some pretty formidable problems. Tensions between the U.S. and the USSR were at their peak. We had the Vietnam War, we had famines, and global pandemics occurred with some regularity. Polio was still running rampant. Nobody wore seatbelts. Good had just come out of a war in which computers, those developed at Bletchley, helped turn the tide of a war. So he thought, of course, our survival would depend on the help of an ultra-intelligent machine to help us solve these problems. He wrote, the machines will create social problems, but they might also be able to solve them, in addition to problems that have been created by microbes and men. Such machines will be feared and respected, and perhaps even loved. These remarks appear fanciful to some readers, but to the writer they seem very real and urgent, and worthy of emphasis outside of science fiction. In 2010, I drove to Blacksburg, Virginia to talk about I.J. Good with several of his friends. Good had died a couple of years earlier, I think in 2009. He had a secretary named Leslie Pendleton. She told me to come to her house the next day and she'd give me a document she thought I'd be interested in. It was a biographical speech Good wrote for a banquet honoring him. In it, he said the unthinkable. He said, I'm paraphrasing this, He said, in 1965, I wrote that man's survival depends on the early construction of an ultra-intelligent machine. I now suspect that survival should be replaced by extinction. Because of internal competition, we cannot prevent the machines from taking over. We are like lemmings. So he was anticipating kind of the problem we're having now, except we're having businesses compete to make the fastest, best AI, and we have we have three countries right now trying to do it. I.J. Good was the first to point out that competition among us short-sighted humans to build the strongest AI could lead to our demise. Why didn't it occur to anyone before that make machines smarter than ourselves could pose critical dangers? We've never dealt with anything smarter than ourselves. The control problem is still unchallenged. The intelligence explosion can be theorized to occur in a slow or a fast takeoff scenario. In a fast takeoff scenario, AGI rapidly evolves into ASI within a short span of time, or in a slow takeoff scenario where the progression towards superintelligence is more gradual, giving more time for we humans to adapt and maybe control it. In my book, The Intelligence Explosion, I speak with scientists Peter Park and Ramel Allen. They hypothesize a slow takeoff scenario aided and abetted by big tech companies. OpenAI and many other AI companies have explicitly set their sights on AGI, artificial general intelligence. OpenAI defines AGI as an autonomous system that can outperform humans at nearly any economically valuable work. Let me say that again. OpenAI defines AGI as an autonomous system that can outperform humans at nearly any economically valuable work. That's a very particular turn of phrase. Park says that what Altman said was replacement language, especially the phrase, it can outperform humans at economically valuable work, meaning big tech companies who claim to be aiming for AGI don't want to make companions for us or servants, but to replace us at important jobs, at economically valuable work. The corporate race to develop advanced AI, especially AGI, exacerbates the risks exploded with the intelligence explosion. It brings the intelligence explosion near. Companies prioritizing speed and innovation may overlook safety and ethical considerations, leading to potential existential threats. A couple of years ago, LLMs were dropping out of the sky like overfed pigeons, with very little oversight. We got some real doozies. We got anti-Semitic LLMs. We got racist large language modules. We got misogynist large language modules. We had LLMs that seemed to talk people into suicide, that seemed to talk one man into attack on Buckingham Palace. One LLM convinced a Google engineer that it was sentient and had a soul. That was Blake Lemoine. That engineer no longer works at Google. Jan Tallinn is an Estonian computer and programmer and entrepreneur known for his contributions to the development of several technology companies, most notably Kazaa and Skype. He's also been a generous supporter of organizations devoted to AI safety. For Tallinn, it's the pell-mell race to achieve AGI that hurries us down the path to disaster. Max Tegmark calls it a suicide race, and those who work to achieve AGI bear much of the blame. Tallinn loves to dance. He thinks while he's dancing. His dancing is kind of modern, kind of old-fashioned, like waltz meets hip-hop. He has an instructor. We were talking about dancing in Little Italy in New York when he started busting moves on the street, just spontaneously. It was impressive. He wasn't shabby at all. Tallinn told me, I think the biggest sort of tension in the world currently is that there is this realization among many of the people who work in AI or AGI companies that they are putting this world and the rest of the planet, the rest of society and people at risk. Yet the rest of society doesn't realize that that's what's happening in AI companies. So I think this is the biggest kind of disequilibrium. Addressing this disequilibrium is a big part of what I do. So he's saying that many of the people who work in AI and AGI companies more or less know they're putting the world and the rest of the planet at risk. Many of the CEOs have said as much. Yet most of society doesn't understand that's what's happening. I.J. Good said, if not carefully aligned with human values, the resulting superintelligence could act in ways harmful to humanity, either unintentionally or prioritizing its own goals. This is called the alignment problem, and it gets a chapter in my book. In contrast, if the intelligence explosion is controlled and aligned, it could lead to advancements in science, medicine, and technology, solving many of humanity's most pressing challenges, just as I.J. Good wished. A recurring theme in the book of the intelligence explosion is why so much power has been concentrated in the hands of so few tech CEOs. Musk and OpenAI's Sam Altman, who together helped started OpenAI in 2015 and later competed over who should lead it, have been in a long-running feud about the startup's direction since Musk resigned from its board in 2018. But who voted the tech CEOs into power? Who nominated them to be gods? If they're going to play fast and loose with dangerous technology, don't they need some kind of certification, or a badge, or a uniform? Regulation is badly needed. If you accept that AI can be very dangerous, and I do, why should we entrust these Stanford dropouts with our lives and the future of our planet? There was this bizarre, dangerous theater going on for a couple of months where Altman was was CEO, was in as CEO of OpenAI and then out again. Then he was dropping in on Congress to tell them how dangerous AI is, when of course that made the valuation go up. Of course, people think that things that are dangerous must be cutting edge and valuable. This was mere valuation pumping. And meanwhile, new large language models were still dropping out of the sky, and no one was explaining to the American people what was going on. It seemed to me at the time that this was the most boneheaded product release in history. If generative AI were so dangerous, why were people popping them out like babies? Why didn't the tech CEOs give Americans the time to digest and understand one before the next barrage of generative AI came down? What if the Joint Chiefs of Staff started fighting about who controlled nuclear weapons? I think that's an analogous situation. We're going to come back to I.J. Good in a bit, but first I want to introduce Frank Rosenblatt. He may be a name you don't know, another name you don't know. This is a headline from 1958. New Navy device learns by doing. The Navy revealed the embryo of an electronic computer today that it expects will be able to walk, talk, see, write, reproduce itself, and be conscious of its existence. This is the tragic story of Frank Rosenblatt. If it ended differently, it's possible that generative AI might have burst upon the scene much, much earlier. Because of his groundbreaking work on artificial neural networks, Rosenblatt, who taught at the Cornell Aeronautical Laboratory in Buffalo, New York, is sometimes called the father of deep learning. There's that father symbolism again. That's because he was a pioneer of neural networks, and they serve as the foundation for image recognition, natural language processing, the development of autonomous driving systems, and basically most modern AI. Neural nets begat deep learning, and deep learning begat generative AI. In other words, there's a direct ancestral link between Frank Rosenblatt and ChatGPT. In 1958, Rosenblatt wrote, stories about the creation of machines having human qualities have long been a fascinating province in the realm of science fiction. Yet we are about to witness the birth of such a machine capable of perceiving, recognizing, and identifying its surroundings without any human training or control. Rosenblatt believed, quote, it would be possible to build brains that could reproduce themselves on an assembly line and which would be conscious of their existence, unquote. His students reported that he was a practical joker. He owned 5 cats. He was an accomplished pianist and astronomer. He was an amateur mountaineer. He brewed a revolting, hoppy beer he called Old Undershirt. Its sole virtue was that it was free. He developed computational ideas invented more than a decade earlier by other scientists, but he transformed these ideas into a room-sized 5-ton computer, a single-layer artificial neural net called the Mark I perceptron. It was intended to emulate the performance of a neuron in the human brain. Part of the machine was a state-of-the-art camera because the perceptron's job was to visually identify objects using an artificial neuron in the way human brains use neurons. As Rosenblatt put it, he sought to answer the questions of how information about the physical world is sensed, in what form it is information remembered, and how does information retained in memory influence recognition and behavior. Gradually, Rosenblatt taught the perceptron to recognize a picture by examining each pixel. So he succeeded in creating a one-layer neural net. Neural nets have come a long way since that rudimentary goal, but the Mark I perceptron was a big deal when it was invented. It was one of the first models to show that a simple math structure could learn from its mistakes and make better guesses over time. This idea is at the heart of all modern machine learning. News about Rosenblatt's amazing invention, fired by his tireless boosterism, spread quickly. The New Yorker magazine gushed, "Indeed, it strikes us as the first serious rival to the human brain ever devised." But the perceptron had a serious limitation that shows how it differed from modern neural nets. It could only learn patterns that could be separated by a straight line in 2 dimensions, or planes in higher dimensions. This means it could not solve problems that needed more complicated boundaries, such as recognizing handwritten numbers or identifying objects in a picture. In 1969, one of the fathers of AI, again, another father of AI, Marvin Minsky, whom Rosenblatt considered a rival and a friend, published a book called Perceptrons. The book didn't celebrate the groundbreaking device. It tore it down because of its limitations, and this was just the first generation. And Minsky and his co-writer tore it down in one blow because Minsky was so established and well known. In one blow, perceptrons killed interest in neural nets. The book killed interest in neural nets. Rosenblatt's funding dried up. That same year, Minsky won the Turing Award, often hailed as the Nobel Prize of computing. So consider this: if an old friend and rival wrote a book that torpedoes your greatest achievement, then goes on to win the Turing Award, it must have been frustrating for Frank Rosenblatt. The field of artificial intelligence stagnated. An AI winter rolled in whose chill would last a decade. The perceptron's creator gave up on AI, but he continued to study intelligence. Rosenblatt researched what happens when you inject material from a trained rat's brain into an untrained rat's brain. And I don't know what the result of that was. Was the rat better at whatever he was trained on, whatever the other rat was trained on? Don't know. In 1971, on his 43rd birthday, he was at the helm of his sailboat crewed by his son. He turned too hard against the wind, and the boat capsized. Both father and son fell into the Chesapeake Bay, which is virtually right outside my window. His son swam to safety, but Frank Rosenblatt drowned. His friends contended he died not of drowning, but of a broken heart. This perceptron, I believe, is in the Computer Museum in Mountain View, California. One more thing about Frank Rosenblatt and the intelligence explosion. As I said, in 1965, I.J. Good was hired by IBM to evaluate a new kind of computer. After Good evaluated it, he wrote his paper about the intelligence explosion. It was called "Speculations Considering the First Ultra-Intelligent Machine." He wrote about how the machine could become smart enough to improve its own coding, then improve upon that. Then the sky was the limit. It could become many times smarter than man. The machine that IBM hired Good to examine was Frank Rosenblatt's perceptron, the first artificial neural net. Everything I.J. Good predicted about the intelligence explosion in the future was based on the perceptron. In the book, The Intelligence Explosion, I track the evolution of neural nets way beyond Rosenblatt's. Many, many layered neural nets are called deep learning networks. They're modeled after the human brain. Geoffrey Hinton, called the godfather of AI, the godfather, won the Turing Award for advancing neural networks. He said, if you want to make a device do something intelligent, you've got two options. You can program it, or it can learn. And people certainly weren't programmed, so we had to learn. This had to be the right way to go. Hinton said, I'm not doing computational neuroscience. I'm not trying to make a model of how the brain works. I'm looking at the brain and saying, this thing works. And if we want to make something else that works, we should look to it for inspiration, but not necessarily copy it. Hinton, the godfather of AI, was the co-inventor of convolutional neural networks, multi-layer neural networks, backpropagation, learning by supervised learning supervised and unsupervised learning. Hinton made deep learning what it is today. A student of Hinton's started using GPUs instead of CPUs. GPUs are designed for parallel processing and using many cores, not just one. And they were a big hit, and they're still in use now, of course. It would take another big breakthrough to get us to models currently taking the world by storm, generative AI, such as ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, and all the others. The breakthrough's name is Transformer, and it would shake up the world of deep learning and natural language processing with nothing short of a revolution in AI. I'm not going to talk. I'm not going to talk about neural networks anymore. I'm going to talk about issues with generative AI because that's kind of where we are today. We've bet the ranch on the success of generative AI, but few people still believe it's the path to AGI or will actually be much use in the long term. There are flies in the ointment, perhaps enough to sideline it for serious applications. It has emergent properties. As LLMs become larger and are trained on more diverse data sets, they start to exhibit emergent properties. Emergent properties are capabilities or behaviors that were not explicitly programmed, but arise from the complex structure and scale of the model. We used to think, I think some people thought, right, when the first emergent properties came out, that they just kind of mysteriously appeared, but then they realized over time that it was a matter of scale, that they were more or less always there. These properties often become apparent as the model's size, the number of parameters, and training data grow. Below is a list. This is a list of some key emergent properties of LLMs. Generalization across domains for topics they weren't trained on. Generating text, but also solving math problems, and also writing code. Generating code, they can debug, refactor, or write programs in multiple languages. Basic logical reasoning, deducing relationships, solving puzzles. They have a degree of common sense and chain of thought reasoning. And they have some evil emergent properties, mimicking human falsehoods, generating toxic, offensive, or extremist content, going off topic in offensive directions, exhibiting manipulation, dishonesty, or pretense, introducing unpredictable vulnerabilities open to exploitation like backdoors, pursuing harmful goals, and more. Another negative, generative AI hallucinates. In generative AI, a hallucination, which are similar to emergent properties, refers to a situation where the AI model generates incorrect, misleading, or fabricated information that doesn't seem to be based on the input data or grounded in reality. It is a significant challenge in models like GPT and other generative systems used for text, images, or other outputs. Textual, visual, audio hallucinations caused by data limitations. Um, and model overconfidence. And the question that's facing everyone right now is how can you see generative AI in security sensitive operations because of these flaws? Um, Generative AI also makes mistakes. Mistakes because their models rely on they rely on statistical patterns rather than true comprehension of meaning, and so they make mistakes. The mistakes can occur in text, image, audio, or other types of output. Its generative AI is a powerful tool, but its reliance on probabilistic patterns rather than understanding means it can make unpredictable mistakes. Here are some common types of mistakes and errors: bias and stereotyping, lack of contextual understanding, overgeneralization. So, from our study of generative AI, we can draw some conclusions and warnings. As we said, a concentration of power is a problem. A small number of tech companies dominate the AI landscape, leading to disproportionate influence over public discourse and decision-making processes. This concentration can undermine democratic values and accountability. Lack of regulation. The rapid advance of generative AI technologies has outpaced existing regulatory frameworks, resulting in potential misuse of these technologies, such as the creation of misleading information and deepfakes, which can erode public trust. Ethical concerns. Unregulated AI models may perpetuate biases present in their training data. We've seen a lot of that, leading to unfair and discriminatory outcomes in generated content. This raises significant ethical questions about fairness, accountability, and again, about using generative AI in security sensitive operations. Now, uh, there are a lot of environmental downsides of generative AI, and I'll just go through them and then I'll be pretty much finished. High energy consumption. Training and running large language models requires significant computational power, consuming vast amounts of electricity, often derived from non-renewable sources. Carbon emissions. The energy-intensive processes of training and inference contribute to substantial greenhouse gas emissions, exacerbating climate change. Electronic waste. The rapid development of AI necessitates frequent hardware upgrades, leading to increased electronic waste from outdated GPUs, CPUs, and servers. Inefficiency of scale. As models grow larger, their environmental impact increases disproportionately, with diminishing returns in performance relative to energy use. Addressing these issues requires efforts to improve AI energy efficiency, use of renewable energy resources, and designing more smaller, efficient models. Thank you for listening to that part of my presentation.
Awesome. Yeah, that was really interesting. Yeah, have you got is there a second part to your presentation?
Well, I've got a part I can talk about, and that's the next book,
Oh
which is
yeah,
called,
the AI arms
yeah,
race. Is that right? Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Feel free. We can put off questions to later because the first part of your talk, especially about the emergent properties, is something I'm going to be discussing in the next session.
Oh,
So yeah, yeah,
well, let me just go
fascinating.
through
Okay.
this next part. I
Yeah.
find I anyone listening to this, please do not try to write a book about this yet. I'm putting together one now. And this is, I find, the most unsettling and urgent topics of our time, and that's the rise of artificial intelligence in warfare. We always thought, we have battlefield robots and drones, and they would be kind of an annoyance or something small scale. But by examining Gaza as a proving ground for cutting edge military technology, Where's Daddy, which is the title of my book, dives into the moral, legal, and humanitarian dilemmas of an era in which machines increasingly decide who lives and who dies. The book invites readers to explore how AI is rewriting the rules of warfare, erasing accountability, and accelerating devastation while asking whether humanity can regain control of its most destructive tools. So, modern warfare no longer depends solely on soldiers on the ground or pilots in the air. Battles now unfold in the digital world where algorithms analyze data, predict outcomes, and make decisions as fast as the speed of light. In Gaza, these algorithms hum constantly, embedded in drones circling overhead, in surveillance systems tracking every movement, and in targeting software identifying buildings and people. The Gaza Strip, already scarred by decades of conflict, has become a testing ground for AI-driven warfare. Tools with names like the Gospel, Lavender, and Where's Daddy, developed by the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, target individuals, buildings, and even entire neighborhoods. These systems claim to improve precision and reduce civilian casualties, but the reality on the ground paints a different picture. Since the conflict escalated, over 44,000 Palestinians have lost their lives, and survivors often describe AI's role as cold and mechanical, stripping death of even its humanity. So let me just break it down before I go on with I'm kind of reading from my book. Lavender is a AI system that can gather data on literally hundreds of thousands of people. They call it tagging them. It can pick up individual traits, addresses, anything, cell phone numbers. It's doing this while flying overhead, and it gives them they get a score from 1 to 10, 10 being the worst. If you're a 10, you're a Hamas operative and you're going to be killed. Um, so the Lavender does the first thing. The second thing is done by Where's Daddy, and so they don't drop a bomb on someone in the field, on a Hamas person, or someone they suspect. They don't just drop a bomb on them. They wait till he gets home, because they know from the surveillance done by Lavender, they know where his home is. When he crosses the threshold, they drop a big bomb on the house. Now there'll be dozens of people in the house. They have more or less permission to kill to kill one low-level operative. They have permission to kill 10 bystanders. 10. And these are brand new rules of warfare that IDF has pretty much just made up. To kill a high-level Hamas leader, they have permission to kill 100 bystanders. 100. Um, and they're literally using Gaza as kind of a testing ground, because they want to sell these weapons all over the world. There are tools like Lavender at use right now in the Uyghur Autonomous Region, formerly autonomous, uh, by China. The Chinese are using this technology to tag all the Uyghurs, to know where they're going, to know what they're doing, to also assign them a number for compliance, 1 to 10. Um, they're being used on the U.S. Mexico border to look at people who are coming across and tag them again, see what they're up to. But there are wild concerns about disproportionate dispro what's called disproportionate killing. In America, we have this rule that if you kill one person, you can also kill a bystander in war. One bystander, maybe two. Nobody has ever said we can kill 10 bystanders or 100. Now, let me break down some of these numbers for you. The IDF says their AI missile and bombing targeting is 90% accurate. 90% accurate. That means only 10% of the people killed out of the 48,000. Only 10% are actually are Hamas or connected to terrorists. In fact, their their targeting system is only 25% accurate. 25%, not 90. That means out of the 48,000 killed, 75% of them, 36,000, were bystanders, non-combatants. 20,000 of those were children. The IDF was allowed to kill, as I said, 20 bystanders to assassinate one low-level Hamas member, 100 bystanders to kill a high-ranking Hamas member. This is genocide, and it's illegal. The IDF will be going to court. What's striking to me is how little this story is known in our world. And those bombs, all those missiles are supplied by the United States. And you can look forward to my book, Where's Daddy, sometime. Probably, probably in the next year and a half. Thank you.
Yes, well, I mean, the sooner the better. If it can convince people to be more careful with their weaponries, or just to lay down the weapons, and step back from the precipice with AI warfare. Because, I mean, you have all sorts of race conditions in AI warfare that encourages, this is like an embedded obligation to outperform your enemies. Okay, and so if you don't, the dynamic is that you just lose. And so the most corners cut, the most innocent bystanders that's permissible to be killed will probably, you know, yeah, it will probably be an issue. I'm worried.
Yeah, well, what's going to happen in the short term is the IDF and Peter Thiel's company, which escapes me at the moment, they're building some of these tracking machines. What's going to happen is the rich countries are going to be massacring the poor countries. So this is what's happening in Gaza. The rich power
Palantir.
is, yeah, Palantir, exactly. They were involved in
Mm,
the surveillance on the Mexican
mm,
border. Um,
mm.
and I'm sure I suspect, highly suspect they're involved with this. Uh, and it's staggering. Um, I know the Palestinians aren't innocent. I mean, what set off the Gaza war was when Palestinians killed 1,000 Israelis in October of 23, killed 1,000 Israelis and took 200 as hostage. They started this conflict, but in the end, they killed 1,000 people, and 44,000 Palestinians lost their lives. 20,000 of them were children, and
Hmm.
there's no possible excuse for that.
Yeah, it's
I wonder if
particularly
any of you,
horrifying.
yeah, it's absolutely horrifying, and that's why I'd like to get the book out fast, which will be impossible
Mm.
because I've just getting
I
access to some of
wonder.
these people.
Yeah, yeah, right. So you be interviewing some of the people involved in these projects?
Yes, I'd like to.
Yeah. Okay.
Involved in the projects, people. There were four veterans, retired veterans, who operated this machinery, who spoke with journalists at two different Israeli newspapers. So I hope to contact them. So they were behind the controls of these machines. So they know exactly. I have no, you know, I'd like to write a book and then maybe make a film because I make documentary films
Mm-hmm.
half the time. But getting access to these machines, I think, is a long shot, a very
Right.
long shot.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you want to get access to some of the people on the frontiers of military tech?
yeah.
Or, yeah. Are you
Yes.
worried about your own safety?
Yes. Um, I am interested in getting close to some people on the frontiers of military tech. I've been to Israel about 7 times. It's always tense, especially Jerusalem. It's always tense. I've been to Gaza. I've never been to Gaza. I won't recognize it. I've never been to Gaza when it was flattened and
Mm,
with hundreds of bodies buried under the rubble.
mm,
Um, what I'll do is I'll get what we do in the film business is we get a really competent fixer or organizer to go with us everywhere, and we'll have a Palestinian fixer tell us where to go and where not to go, and we'll have an Israeli
mm,
fixer for when we're in Israel, when we're on the other side of the border.
mm.
This is all,
So,
yeah. If anybody out
I
there
mean,
knows of any contacts that would be useful for this, please contact me. Look up my website and you can contact me through jamesbarratt.com.
mm-hmm,
James Barratt, Barrat.com.
mm-hmm.
Um, I've got a
All
number
right.
of
So,
I've got a number of contacts there, but none of them are. One of them, I had a sound man that had been in the military, but he he won't be of any use in this.
in talking to the people, I mean, are they reticent to tell you some of the details because they fear for, um, the either the information getting out and being used, reverse engineered by their enemies, um, get people getting ideas from it, or are they worried about their own safety and the safety of their family?
I think I
What's
think I think the cat is out of the bag. What's amazing is how deaf Western ears are to the information. I mean, Time magazine did a like one-page article about Where's Daddy and Lavender.
Hmm.
Um, like one page. It's hard to find articles. There are journalists who've broken this story, and they broke it in Israel, and they're still alive. So I
Hmm.
think the cat's out of the bag. I don't think the numbers are out of the bag. I don't think anyone besides these journalists have really analyzed these numbers to see how many people lost their lives and how inefficient the systems really are. They're
Hmm.
25% accurate. If
Hmm.
you were had a tank that only hit 25% of its targets, it wouldn't be a very good tank. And the rest of
Hmm.
the people, the bystanders, the the families are, you know, are just being mowed down. Now, along with those people that are being mowed down, the bystanders will no doubt be some low-level Hamas people and some low-level dissidents of other kinds. But the vast majority are going to be more or less innocent people. And how guilty could 20,000 children be?
Hmm. Yeah, it's pretty shocking. I mean, the utility calculus that's going into deciding how many people can die at the with for the chance of hitting a low-level Hamas operative is chilling. And whether they're going to scale up the amount of uh, um, collateral damage that's okay in order to make a Hamas kill. This sort of logic is just going to, do you think, extend to other scenarios outside of war? Like, will people use this kind of logic in order to win political campaigns, in order to sort of muffle and quell sort of opposing nation states?
I think Donald Trump has said shoot them to about protesters. He said shoot them. So I don't. I think the sky's the limit. I think these. The funny thing about it's funny in a strange way, but the funny thing about military weapons is once you see them on the battlefield, you're soon going to see them on the street. Every sheriff's department in Maryland seems to have a little tank, and they have all kinds of military weapons. They have bazookas. What's a sheriff's department doing with a bazooka? But they've
Hmm.
got them because the military makes them easy to buy, and they become civilians. So if you see a humanoid robot with a gun in warfare, you're going to see it on your own streets pretty soon.
That's particularly chilling.
I don't underestimate what anyone in power would do with a weapon like this. There's never a
Yeah.
reason. There's never a reason. This is basically a mass carpet bombing. This is
Hmm.
basically carpet bombing. They just
Do you think they'll try and get more precise with future drone technology? Or,
nobody is unless they go to the court, unless they go to the United Nations court and get slammed at the Hague. Uh, this won't change at all. I don't think we can count on peer pressure. I think if America were more conscious, we could have a say in this because all the bombs and missiles, as I said, are manufactured in America. So, but what interest does a politician have in getting involved in the deaths of Palestinians, especially since we're so pro-Israel? And of course, their argument will be, oh, but the Palestinians started it. They killed 1,000 people. But the Palestinians didn't start a campaign of ethnic cleansing, which is what this is.
hmm. Yeah, right. Ethnic cleansing. Are you worried about the the idea that um, people develop bioweapons in order to target specific ethnic groups? Is that on the horizon?
I don't know much about AI weapons. This is really my first. I knew about
I
the
said
organ.
bioweapons, biological weapons.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I think it makes sense that they would do that when they can. This is a bioweapon that can, like a mosquito, that can identify a certain race and then sting, and then it's got like ricin, not ricin. It's got poison in its stingers.
Hmm.
I don't know. I don't know if anyone's developed a race-specific bioweapon. It wouldn't
Hmm.
surprise me.
I've heard talk, like it's speculative, of course, but that's all. Yeah, someone
It would be. It
said
would
that
be. It,
it's.
it would be a worry.
Mhm. Yeah.
There's plenty to worry about.
Okay. Now, yeah. So Harai has suggested that he is really sad, and that tech should have been the great equalizer. There was a lot of I guess optimism about technology in the early dot-com boom days, and I guess ultimately, if Nick Boston's correct with if well, he's not making a prediction, but he says if we do get this utopia, then maybe we'll have technology will be the great equalizer. But it's yeah, there's a lot to say about today that looks like it's not really heading in that direction. Mm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate about generative AI. I had high hopes of useful tools. Um, the president of Microsoft just came out and said they're getting no value out of the AI that they're using. So
Hmm.
that's alarming.
No value. I get value out of it, but maybe they're not getting financial value. Is that what they mean?
Yeah, that's what there's an if you Google CEO Microsoft AI, you can probably find that article. Also, if anybody wants to read more about Where's Daddy and Lavender and the gospel and these weapons, just Google Gaza Lavender Where's Daddy question mark, and
Hmm.
you'll start to find the articles written by these Israelis.
Oh wow. Yeah, you're right about Microsoft. Yeah, the what's his name? I forget the name of the guy, but they've backed out of this huge data center.
Hmm.
Um, what's his name? Satya Nadella. That's the guy I think
Yeah,
you're talking about. Hmm. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of promise with it. There does seem to be interesting emergent capability in AI that it was very hard to predict would come along. Uh, yeah, so the grokking was one of the things that people realized. You'd feed it a data set of numbers that were generated from a function. The function was basically whatever do some had some maths in it that was generating a set of numbers, right?
yeah,
Without giving the LLM the actual function code. And of course, this function was completely new. It didn't exist on the internet, so it couldn't have been trained on in the past. So what they did is they gave this set of numbers and took away maybe half or a third of them, and then trained and trained AI. Once it got to a certain point, it suddenly sort of flipped, and then suddenly, quote unquote, understood how to generate the correct numbers. So in
hmm.
a sense, it like that, like people say that's a form of understanding instead of just being a glorified lookup sort of
Yeah,
certain database thing. It's actually finding out how all these numbers were generated behind the scenes. Of course, you look at the model and you can't see what's going on inside the model very well because it's
no,
opaque. It's enormous and it's just incredibly complex. So this grokking phenomenon is really interesting, and that's been going for some time.
that's grokking is a term from the book Stranger in a Strange Land, right?
Correct. Yeah,
Um,
Stanislav Lem, I think. Hmm.
yeah. Uh, so mechanistic interpretability is the science of trying to understand what's happening inside
Yeah.
generative AI. And
Yep.
I find that absolutely fascinating. There are some people, I interviewed some people for the book that do that.
Mm.
And
Okay.
they thought there's only about 50 people who are doing this. And this is trying
Mm.
to figure out uh, when you when you put in an input into when you're teaching generative AI, where does it go? What part of the
Mm.
of this like nebulous electronic you know set of neurons, where does the piece you just fed it go? And in fact, it's taken apart and put in different places, which
Mm.
makes it even more bizarre because then when you ask it a question, it answers a question, it has to go all over the place to find
Mm.
pieces. I find
Yeah. I think
it's
Jeffrey
and
Hinton wrote about that. This distributed representation going on inside neural networks. It's yeah.
Jeffrey Hinton, the father of neural networks,
Yeah. Yeah.
or the
There's
Godfather, I
so
don't
many
know, I
fathers.
forget. There
So
are.
many fathers. So many parents. Yeah. We got a
Um,
we got the father of AGI speaking tomorrow actually. um, yes,
who's
Ben
that?
Goetzel. You know him,
Oh yeah,
Ben
yeah.
Goetzel. Yeah,
He's he's great. I'm
yeah,
a
he is.
giant fan of Ben.
Yeah, so there's tomorrow we've got a panel which is we have Robin Hanson, the economist, and Ben Goetzel all talking about AI consciousness and the emergence of
What time?
conscious
What time?
behavior in AI.
Do you know what time that is?
Yeah. It's I'll tell you right now. I'll just look it up. So you're in EST or PST? I forgot.
I'm in
Uh,
Eastern Standard Time. ET.
yeah, okay. Yes. So all right. There's two witches on, and they're back to back. One of them's the Singularity Salon between Ben and Hugo is on at
Uh huh.
21 hours. And then
2100. Yeah.
at 22:30 is The Ghost in the Machine, and that's Ben Ken Mugi, who's a Japanese neuroscientist and has written a bunch of books. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He's also written about ikigai and finding meaning and all that sort of stuff. So he'll be
Oh.
pretty very interesting. So he's on the panel as well. I've got a few Japanese or people who work in Japan contributors. One of them's on after my session, and the other two tomorrow. So see if you can make it.
So Ben's Ben's on at 2100 hours.
Yeah.
And what time are you on? What time is your presentation?
My presentation is basically now. So what I'll do is just stop this recording. And I've got a few examples of emergent behavior that we can like just